right, Mitch. How we doing?
I'm Giddy. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Speaking of Giddy, Josh Giddy last night plays for the Chicago Bulls now.
Oh.
And I don't like that, man. He beat the Magic by himself, basically.
Oh, man.
In the second half.
At least it was close.
He also looks like an accountant. He doesn't even look like a basketball player.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You ever seen this guy?
No.
Played for the Oklahoma City Thunder. They didn't like him for good reason and traded him. And he played great last night for the Bulls. I was not happy about that. But anyways, Giddy. Yeah, we were just laughing about a meeting we came from. We had a good time.
We did. It's just, before we get too far off, even though we always talk about football, maybe less football today. We're on smaller time crunch than normal. So let's just waste time talking about how much time we don't have.
That's my favorite thing to do.
But NFL kickers are some of the, it's coming from somebody who doesn't look like a star athlete, but like when you see NFL kickers,
sneaky athletic.
Funny. Yeah, sneaky athletic, hot name, but like.
All right, it's fine. Tell the story. Tell.
I didn't know how I was going to sneak that in. My wife doesn't know this yet, but we were just at Starbucks at a meeting with a bunch of youth pastors, and it's like this. I mean, probably 60-something-year-old barista asked for the name for our order, and so we said Mitch. And she's like, "Oh, that's a hot guy name." And I was like,
I didn't know what to say.
I didn't really know how to respond.
I didn't either.
Didn't want to really lean into it. Like, thanks for the compliment. I just
quickly
let her know I'm married. Like, yeah, my wife tells me that. Like, I'll let her know. You know, like what?
Like, yeah, that's his name. Yeah, you saved it. You're like, yeah, that's what my wife says.
Yeah.
let me play with my left hand.
Yeah, go home and tell your wife. And I'm like,
oh my gosh.
Thanks for the reminder.
That was tough. You said, what about kickers, though?
Well, you were talking about the guy looks like an accountant. Like, NFL kickers don't look like these stud athletes that you'd be like, bro, are you a pro athlete? You know? Yeah. They can be pretty short. I mean, it's the position that can play regularly into their 40s. Mm-hmm. Like, there's probably been kickers that have been almost 50.
Seriously?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, there was one recently that was, like, deep into his 40s, man.
Really?
Yeah. It makes me want to look up what the oldest kicker was, because I feel like maybe not 50, but
because any other position, like how old is Rodgers now? 39 or 40?
It's either or. I forget exactly. He's at least 39.
Because like Brady playing till 44 was crazy, like unusual, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Some guys, I think Warren Moon played past 40, like to the mid 40s.
Okay.
But I'm trying to think of the name. We could just look it up. We have that ability. But there was a kicker in like the last decade that played, I feel like he was like 48 or something like that. I could be wrong. Got to look it up now as you're talking about something else.
I'll give the people my rundown. The UCF Knights, we stink, lost to BYU, what am I saying? BYU on Saturday. I don't even think BCU exists. BYU. Liberty lost last Wednesday night and then lost last night. So as we're recording today, it's Halloween, and Liberty is now 5-2. We should be 7-0. So that's a bummer. The Jaguars, they stink. Almost won, lost by 3 on Sunday. Almost pulled it off, but did not. So every football team in my world stinks right now. Liberty doesn't stink. They're 5-2. That's a decent record. But like, in order to make any noise in the playoffs or in a bowl game or whatever, they've got to go undefeated just because of their conference or whatever. UCF basketball tips off on Monday in a few days from now. The Magic doing all right. We have not recorded since Paolo dropped a 50 ball on Monday night, so that was a huge deal in the league, in Paolo's development, in the history of the Magic franchise. It's only the 6th 50 ball that's been dropped. So that was cool. But last night, man, give you a quick rundown. We scored 64 in the first half and couldn't hit nothing in the second half. Lost by 3, I think, last night, which is just crazy. We were up by 20 in the first half. Lost by 3. Josh Giddy came alive in the second half. But the fourth quarter was so hard to watch. It was like 4 minutes left, I think. I don't remember when the first field goal was actually hit, but there were 7 or 8 minutes that went by in the fourth quarter where neither team hit a field goal.
Oh, jeez.
They were like a combined 0 for 21 or something. which has to be an NBA record. And then there's like 2 minutes left, and they're like, yeah, the Bulls have won this quarter 8-6. I'm like, oh my gosh, they've they've scored a combined 14 points in the fourth quarter. It was so ugly. So we kind of deserved to lose that game just based on the contrast between two halves, but that was a really frustrating one. And then we were down. I won't get into all of it, but we were down 4 and scored and got the ball back and then missed the layup. And then we were down 3 with 0.1 seconds left, which by the rules is not enough time to make a shot, like even if you make it. But we still inbounded it and like shot a shot and made it. And so everyone's frustrated.
No way.
Like, no, we should go to overtime. Like, Paolo got the ball and made a 3. But like by the rules, 0.3 points is the minimum time left on the clock for a shot like that, and he had 0.1. So like he shouldn't even tried. Like you should have just like inbounded and shook hands. But
it just makes it that much worse. If you had 0.5 seconds instead of 0.1.
Well, that's what I was telling Hannah. I was like, we shouldn't, because like if you look at the replay, like he made the shot before the buzzer went off, but that's because like it's a human pressing play on the clock, you know, like. But by the rule book, you got to have at least 0.3 on the clock or whatever. Yeah. And so the argument would be that there should have been more time on the clock because that's a very small margin. Like, you could probably go back and look.
Yeah, it's a human that stopped the clock, too.
Exactly.
So you could have had a full second.
Exactly. You could probably go back and look because it was a foul. So, like, we were down 1 and we fouled the Bulls, and then they made both their free throws to go up 3. But you could probably go back and look at the replay and say, you know what, when we committed the foul, there's actually 0.7 seconds on the clock, you know, and Paolo's shot should have counted, but there's no way to, it's not reviewable or anything like that. But like that would be the case to make, is not that he got it off in 0.1 seconds because the league has already decided by the rules you can't do that. But I think you could make a case that there should have been more time on the clock. But it like the case that I'm making is we shouldn't have been in that position in the first place. we were up 20 in the first half. Oh, man. So that was frustrating, and that we are on a tough road trip right now, a 5-game road trip, like in Cleveland tomorrow night, which is a rematch from the playoffs. We're going to Dallas. We're going to some tough cities, and last night should have been a gimme against the Bulls, and we lost. So it's a really tough way to start a tough road trip. But anyways,
I'll cheer you up here with some NFL kicker stats.
Please do.
I found a top 10 list, and it started out with guys that were 43, which is still. It's over 40 for kickers.
Okay.
But the top 2, Morton Anderson and George Blanda played until they were respectively 47 and 48 kicking in the NFL.
Huh.
George Blanda, they've got it down to 48 years, 3 months, 18 days.
Oh, my gosh.
January 4th. Must have been probably a playoff game in 76. Kicking for the Oakland Raiders, 48 years old.
Dang, that's crazy.
That's wild. And that dude, I think Anderson or Blanda played some. I think it was Blanda played some QB and some kicker and maybe another position, a punt or two or something like that. But so I don't know if he also quarterbacked when he was 48. But we won't waste any more time looking into that. But 48-year-old kicking a ball out there.
Interesting. All right, you had an interesting win in fantasy over the weekend.
Yeah,
by a decimal. Speaking of 0.1.
Yes. Well, I got to brag on the Toby. Don't listen to this podcast. No offense to our student ministry league. I did have a very interesting tight win in the league that is a redraft that I care less about because I have 3 dynasty leagues which are forever. I've given you my overly spiritual analysis that it's like living for life right now or living for eternity. Heretical more than overly spiritual.
That's awesome.
But we don't take live calls on the podcast. But yeah, so my really interesting one is in my 3rd dynasty league that I'm in that I created. Maybe people have commissioner bias accusations there, but I was 7-0 playing another team, the other team in our league that's 7-0. And so it was a pretty big game. He has more points scored than me, so he was in first place, and I took him down. We both didn't score that many points. It was kind of an off week for both of us. There were other teams that would have smoked us. So I complain often about head-to-head, how you can have the second most points, but you just happen to play the guy with the most points, and you lose, and someone else puts up 86 and they win. But I've benefited from that a few times this year. So 8-0 still. Team's looking hot. Really excited about that.
8-0, my goodness.
Yeah, it's wild. I can't think of the last time I started a fantasy season 8-0.
And
my team's like stacked and young. And so I've given up. I have like max 4 or 5 draft picks over the next 3 years. Each year there's a 3-round rookie draft. And so we all started with 9 future draft picks when the league began. And I've done some trades and I have like 4 or 5 picks left over 3 years. But I don't really need to rebuild much. I got a lot of young talent. But
so send me your draft picks. Give me your third for Richardson.
Different league. But I still might do that.
Transfer.
I just don't want to drop anybody. I guess I could drop Russell Wilson. Jalen Hurts is past a bye week, so I don't really need. I could just hold out on Richardson and hope Hurts doesn't get hurt.
That's true. I don't think anybody would go pick up Russell. Do you? Sean might.
He's on a bye right now, so right away, I don't know. He was like the QB1 the first week he played, and was like mid-range this last week.
But Richardson's benched for the rest of the year. Do you know that?
Well, moving forward, it's not just like let's give him a week off. He's he's in timeout or something. He might come back. Joe Flacco's 39. Speaking of old players,
right? But I kind of expect Flacco to finish the season for them.
Yeah,
don't you?
That's what it looks like now. I think they said they're not totally giving up on Richardson, kind of a Bryce Young situation.
Yes.
But it's like we have this veteran who can help us try to win now, and maybe Richardson needs to learn under him. So for a third, it'd be worth the stash. But then I'm down to, I might as well give him my 4th and 5th, too. I don't really care about 4th. I forgot we have 5 rounds in that.
You can send them all. Yes. Send them.
I'd rather give you a 4th and 5th than a third if that piques your interest.
No. A second it is.
Yeah. But this sparked from our student ministry league. I did have a very, very close win against one of our mentors. I went into Monday Night Football down like 30 or 35 points. I had Malik Neighbors and the Steelers defense. I thought it was doable. I didn't know if it would happen, but it came really down to the last play of the game. Like I was down. I periodically checked it. And late in the 4th, I was down like 15 or 10 points or something. I was like, good win. It was close. But then it was close enough to where the last drive of the game for the Giants, first off, the previous drive, there was like a forced fumble recovered or something like that. But then Malik Neighbors got a couple catches, and I guess I was down by just under 2 points. Steelers defense got an interception, and it put me up. I mean, it was like 145.18 to 145.35 or something like super. Like you got to break out the calculator to see how close the decimal was. Like it was down by just under 2. Interception count as 2 points. And John was like, I feel bad too. It's like, this is his league. You know, he's not in 4 leagues like a lunatic. And so he's like watching it. Like I was supposed to go to bed an hour ago, but I got to see if I'm going to win. Yeah. And I messaged in the chat. I was like, what a comeback. And he's like, no way! I was 99% chance to win.
Yeah, he should.
20 seconds ago, the game was almost over.
He should have won. Yeah, he should have.
So, anyways,
he should have. Well, hey, we could talk sports pretty much all day.
Too much.
But let's talk student ministry for a minute. We wrapped up last night in student ministry and in college ministry. We wrapped up our Hot Topic series for the month of October. We talked about that a little bit on the podcast. Last night's hot topic was pornography. So it's a hot topic. It's also just kind of an uncomfortable topic. But how do you feel like that message went in college ministry?
I think it went well. You've talked about you felt like you prepared more this series than you normally do. Not that you normally don't prepare well. I know you prepare well, and your messages are always very clear and concise. But I just kind of the way my weeks go, I was able to put more time into this one of you and I brainstormed together, and then I got to a few times kind of time it and say it out loud to myself and see kind of how I want to go about it. And I think it went well. I was telling you earlier, I've gotten some good feedback from people, from our college students about the series, and they've liked the topics, and I've tried to encourage to keep these conversations going. But and you preached it to middle school and high schoolers, I preached to young adults, and so I took a slightly different angle, talking about just the issue of pornography, and single people don't see it as as big of a deal and think that they'll just stop if they enter a relationship or a marriage, but how like so many studies show it's like as or more addicting than like cocaine, and like it does real things to your brain that affects it negatively, and just how much of a risk it is to dabble in it at all, and just how, and that doesn't mean if you don't want to get married, then it's okay. Like the text says, if you look at a woman lustfully to God, that's adultery. He knows the intentions of your heart. And so we just got to have, I feel like the Hot Topics theme really set the tone to end on that, on maybe the least comfortable one to talk about. But it went well. I felt good about it.
Yeah, same. I felt good as well. Yeah, I probably, like, if I preached that topic, that message to college students, I probably would have felt a little more freedom.
Yeah.
Than with, the student ministry, because you've got currently, in the way we're set up, you've got like 12-year-old girls in the room with 18-year-old dudes, so it's quite the spectrum of demographics. But it was super age appropriate. I mean, we honed in on Matthew 5:27 through 30. That's the text that you referenced already, just talking about adultery is bad, lust is adultery, and if you're struggling with lust and adultery, then gouge out your eye, cut off your hand. Like, it's just a really straightforward, it's like we were talking about how it's uncomfortable, but it's a very straightforward topic to preach on. And so it felt good. We started, let's see if I remember our 4 points. We started by talking about how marriage is between one man and one woman for life, because the text talks about adultery, but like adultery doesn't exist without marriage. So you gotta lay the foundation of what marriage is. And we talked about really what adultery is, which is, you got to reserve. We kind of talked about it in a positive sense. So we didn't say like don't have sex outside of marriage. We said reserve all sexual activity for marriage. It's kind of a positive spin on that. And then from there, you're able to talk about pornography and how, point 3, pornography is a serious form of adultery. Matthew 5:28. If you lust, you're committing adultery. And then verses 29 and 30 were point 4. Take extreme measures to combat pornography. Like take some simple measures if they work, like put some software on your phone or whatever. But like at the end of the day, if those simple measures ain't working, then be willing to gouge out your eye and cut off your hand. We made sure to emphasize, don't physically do that. That's a dumb interpretation. We didn't say dumb interpretation. I didn't use such harsh of terms, but it's a poor interpretation. But Jesus was making the point that we should be willing to take extreme measures if needed. So if you need to ditch the smartphone, then ditch the smartphone and get a flip phone. Like your heart's more important than having access to Instagram or whatever. So I felt good about it. I thought it was age appropriate, but still a really important conversation to have. And I think we did it in the right way. I was surprised by Sean. He's been working through a book, Faith for Exiles, with one of our parenting groups. And there was a page in there about Christian parents talking to their kids about pornography and whatever. And it's a Barna research group book, and so that's always very database, data-driven. And the book talks about a survey of teenagers and how the majority of middle schoolers and high schoolers think that pornography is either neutral, like, it's whatever, you want to watch it. If you don't, who cares? Or the majority of middle schoolers and high schoolers think pornography is good, like it's helpful, it's an awesome thing to do and to engage in. But a very small minority of middle schoolers and high schoolers today actually still believe pornography is bad, which, like, if all we did last night was point 3, recognize pornography as a serious form of adultery, if all we did last night was frame up for our students that pornography is bad, like, I think we've mission accomplished in today's day and age, which is crazy. It's crazy, but that's the world we live in. So I don't know if you have any more thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's good. I like the format we had. It's like points 1 and 2, defining marriage. Like that's not really talked about in the text, but like you said, it's important to know what marriage is and know how sex was designed in order to really be able to identify adultery and various kinds of things that compromise God's design for marriage.
Yeah, it wasn't in the text. The word marriage wasn't in the text, but like I think I said last night, it's kind of like trying to define darkness. Darkness is the absence of light. Like, you can't talk about darkness without talking about light. Like, it's kind of like trying to define adultery. You can't talk about adultery without talking about marriage. Like, you got to lay the foundation. And so I was happy with the way we did it. I think we were talking in the car on the way back this morning that, I didn't really tell any jokes. I didn't really have any stories. Like, it was a very, by the way, you can, if you're listening, you can rewatch the entire sermon on our YouTube channel. But it was a very straightforward message, but I still felt like I was sensing I still had a captive audience just because of the topic,
right?
Just because of the nature of the topic. So I didn't feel like I had to work to maintain their attention. I think they were locked in the whole time because of the topic itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and just in my preaching in general, I've been encouraged to, like, it's common to use personal stories and maybe some jokes and stuff like that. But this series, I felt like talking about racism and abortion and stuff like that. I felt like it was fine to not try to bring a little bit of humor into it because they're pretty serious, like, mature conversations.
Yeah.
I did make a joke, like, we're not going to pass out a bunch of machetes and eye patches and tell you just to, like, cut everything off.
Yeah.
I said something dumb like that, but I said that's such a stupid interpretation of the text.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So dumb.
Don't be an idiot.
So stupid.
But yeah, this was a good series, man. It's like bittersweet. Like, there's a little bit of tension to bring the topics up and just have an audience to speak on that. But it's so important. Like, I love topics. I love the just taking the biblical perspective on things like that.
So I was reflecting on the series last night, and it kind of hit me for the first time that so our topics were abortion, homosexuality, racism, and pornography, in that order. And it kind of hit me for the first time last night that 3 of those 4 topics are sexual in nature. Like, abortion is a sexual topic because sex produces babies, and homosexuality is a sexual topic because we're talking about God's design for sex and sexuality. And pornography is obviously a sexual topic because it's a twisted expression of our sexuality, a sinful expression of our sexuality. And it just hit me for the first time that other than racism, other than the racism topic in week 3, we talked about 3 sexual hot topics. I just, I don't know, it's just so interesting to me. Like, I don't know if you have any reflections on that. It's just kind of hearing that for the first time, but like sin is sin. But sometimes when the Bible in the New Testament talks about, like, sexual sin, I feel like it talks about it in, like, stronger terms. Not to say that there's, like, this sin separates you from God more than others. Like, we've all sinned and fallen short. You don't have to fall far to fall short. You know what I mean? But I don't know. I just feel like sexual sin is so serious and so like it has such a great impact on your life and the lives of those around you. I don't know. I just was reflecting on that last night and how so many of the topics we discussed were sexual topics. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I didn't really, like, they're unique enough to where I didn't think too much about that until you just said it. But I think it's good that we still covered a wide range and just, we didn't do this to satisfy specific people on what they want us to talk about or not. But often a knock on the church is that everybody is very harsh on homosexuality and much less harsh on heterosexual sin, like pornography addiction and things like that. And so we didn't do it to please everybody, but I think it's good that we hit a wide range of sexual topics. And it does show just how naturally, when you think of hot topics that connect with policies and amendments and things like that, is like part of the timing of this was the election season. Like various forms of sexuality are just common hot topics.
Yeah, I don't know. It just kind of hit me last night and how sexual purity is so important. So, and I don't know if anybody else drew that conclusion, because we didn't openly state at any point like, hey guys, 3 of our 4 topics this month are sexual topics. Like, but it just hit me last night for the first time. So, anyways, it was good. We talked about maybe you could recycle this series every 4 years whenever there's a big election, because the students can't. Well, your college students can vote, but the students, like middle schoolers and high schoolers, can't vote. But these hot topics get a little hotter in the month leading up to a presidential election every 4 years. It's just the nature of it. And so this might be a good thing to recycle once every 4 years or whatever. But maybe that's not often enough. Maybe we need some hot topics series every year on different topics. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because those aren't the only 4 hot topics.
Right.
There are other hot topics out there. So, yeah, it was good. I really enjoyed that. Let's think. I'm preaching on Sunday.
You're preaching 3 times in a row on Sunday.
Yeah, three times. So our lead pastor, Pastor Cliff, he and his wife, Miss Susie, and some members of our church are overseas. I don't know if I'm supposed to say where, but they're on the mission field. So he's out this weekend. So Pastor Ken has all the services at Village Park campus, and Pastor Nathan has the service, soon to be 2 services in January, but the service at our South campus, and I've got all 3 services downtown. I've only preached 3 in a row one time. I've preached 2 in a row several times, but I've only preached 3 in a row one time. This will be my second time doing it, so I'm excited. Looking forward to it.
So you've done 2 multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel? I guess you don't have, maybe, I don't know how much different it is to do 3 instead of 2. Do you feel like do you like doing multiple services in a row? Does it make it, I mean, you probably have a decent manuscript, but you don't say word for word the exact same thing every time. Maybe a story comes up that didn't come up the first time, or an application. How do you feel about doing multiple services in a row? Does it get, like, especially by the 3rd, this will only be your 2nd time, but does it get exhausting to do the same basic thing that many times?
I don't personally think so, and you'd be surprised by how little I change too, because I like, in the big room at least, I manuscript every, when I say big room, like a main service, I manuscript, and in big church, I manuscript, and so like, there's not a whole lot of, I mean, you gotta leave some room for the Holy Spirit to like bring something to mind or whatever before you get up there in between services. Like, I'm certainly open to that, but I typically don't change like a whole story or a whole application or a whole illustration. I might change like a phrase, like I don't really like the way I said that sentence or something, but you'd be surprised by how little I change from one service to the next when I preach multiple times. It's always just weird to me because, like, no matter when I preach or where I preach, like, I always get, like, a little bit nervous. Like, I think that's healthy. But, like, after the first time I preach, I come down and I have this moment where I forget that I'm supposed to do it again, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, I don't actually forget and not show up. Like, I don't do that. But, like, there's a moment where it's like, oh, good, it's done. And I'm like, oh, I got to go again. Like, there's always that, like, moment of realization that, like, that was just one of 2 or that was just one of 3, you know. So,
So then are you just the same amount of nervous again when you go back up?
Not really. Not really, no. No, I don't think so. Still like a little bit nervous, but I think once you get the first one under the belt, it's kind of like it's just like an economy of scale. Like you think about take camp, for example. Like if you build out a summer camp with a registration link and a speaker and a band and a property and volunteers and rec equipment and whatever, you like, if let's say you take your group to these are not our numbers, but just for the purpose of this conversation, like let's say you take your group to a site that has 1,000 beds and you have the whole property, but you only bring 500 students. Well, like the difference between bringing 500 and 800 is not that big of a difference because you're going to do all the same stuff just with more people.
Yep.
If that makes sense. So like the difference between preaching like one service or 2 services or 3 services is not that different because like all of the work is in the prep, like the hours and hours of prep. And if on Sunday morning you just have to like do it twice instead of once, or 3 times instead of twice, like that to me is no more exhausting than like just doing it once, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
So it may be different for everybody, but that's my personal experience, is like I feel the same level of exhaustion like prepping and preaching one time as I do for like 3 times. But I don't know, ask me again at noon on Sunday. see how I feel. So see how I feel. We've talked about guest preaching on here. It's been a while, but we talked about guest preaching. Guest preaching meaning like as a student pastor filling the pulpit for your lead pastor, and some tips and tricks on that. So we chatted about that a little bit. But yeah, this is a standalone message on Sunday. I prefer to just be in series and like, here's the passage, here's the outline, preach it. Not here's a word for word manuscript, but like here's the passage and the outline, kind of make it your own, because that you don't have to then go like hunting for a passage and like what has God been laying on your heart recently, and then take that passage and like form all the points on your own. So like I prefer to be in series because it really cuts down on the prep time, but feeling good.
Yeah, I've had the privilege of being on the other side of that. We've had once a month, we have like a guest preacher at late night. And so I just get to be like, just if you want to come preach, just pick something. So less work for me than to give them something or to do it in series or whatever, but put them in the position of like, I wish you would just tell me what to do, you know?
Right. Yeah.
It's not really intentional, but it works out well that our series go the same length and the same passages as student ministry. And FWP is during student ministry time, and then late night, I have a standalone guest preacher. I've got some students that are able to come up and preach, and that's been really fun. So
yeah, it's good. Let's see what else. Thankfully, we have not taken a 6-week break between podcasts this time, so not as much to recap. But any other? We
had had our Solar Bears college ministry event on Saturday.
Oh yeah,
that was fun.
The Solar Bears, that's the Orlando minor league hockey team.
For the Tampa team, the Lightning or the Rays or whatever they're called.
Oh, yes.
I don't know non-NFL that well. Is it the Lightning? The Rays are baseball. The Tampa,
the
Tampa
Lightning,
Bay Lightning is the hockey team.
That's right. Yeah.
So the ECHL is like East Coast Hockey League. And the Solar Bears. Florida's got some funny names, man. Like Solar Bears is funny because it's a polar bear, but he's got like shades on because it's like Florida.
Yeah.
What's his name? The mascot was running around. His name is Shades, actually. Funny enough.
For real?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's just someone in a solar bear or polar bear suit with shades on. There's my favorite one is the Florida Everblades. I love awesome. A good play on words. They played the Savannah Ghost Pirates, which is just, you just are able to do whatever you want when you're naming a minor league hockey team.
Yeah.
But we had a good time. We had about, I think about 16 college students and a few leaders there, so a group of 20. We got seats all together. And the quote-unquote like nosebleeds, we were not as high as you possibly could be, but also it's in the Kia Center. The same, the Magic play, their court is above the ice for the hockey. It's kind of cool. No pun intended. And so,
what do you mean it's above the ice?
Like the ice stays there on that stadium. Like they lay the floor down for the Magic like above the ice.
What?
Like they're literally. I've looked into this because people don't believe me. You can look it up if you don't believe me. But they legitimately like the ice stays there, and so when the Magic play, there's ice below their floor. That's why the players slip all the time. JK.
I do wonder now. I wonder if the floor is cold. Huh.
Somebody told me that's why the arena is like chillier than some, but I don't know if that's really true. But yeah, that's kind of funny.
What?
Funny little known fact there.
I did not know that. Interesting. I mean, I definitely believe you. I just had no idea.
I doubt myself when I tell it and people don't believe me because I'm like, yeah, that just sounds crazy, right? But that has I don't know how else they would do it.
I wonder how many arenas that's the case.
When I looked it up, there's a few.
Okay.
There's maybe 3 or 4. And it could be even more than that, but
the nerdy side of me wants to look into like the home court record of the teams that have ice under their courts, compared to the home court records of teams that don't have ice under their courts.
Yeah, ice under your court or in your veins.
Yeah, exactly. That's fascinating. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Now I want to go touch the court.
So that was a fun event. Some people had never been to a hockey game.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to, that's my second Solar Bears game I've been to. I think when I was a young kid, I went to a hockey game, and you just kind of remember the fights, you know. Those guys are scrappy.
Right.
But that was good, man. We have an Orlando Magic game January 25th. We're going to be going there. So ASAP, we got to get on some tickets for that.
As ASAP as possible.
Yeah. But that event was fun. We had a good time there.
Yeah.
I had a couple people who have never been or only been a few times to the ministry, and so these events have been a good way to connect with people. We did Top Golf last month and Solar Bears this month, and had at least one or two that have never been or have only been a little bit. So it's a great way to get people connected, and maybe they start coming weekly because they got connected through the event. And so it's a good time, man. Yeah,
the trajectory of our college ministry is definitely on the right track in terms of like the content, the leadership, the discipleship, the culture of community, but I mean also numerically, like the attendance is on the right track.
Yeah.
So the attendance at the gatherings, the attendance at the events that are in addition to the gatherings, like everything is on the way up. It's looking good. I'm pretty happy with all that. Hey, with the time we have left, this morning we alluded to it. We went to a Lake County Youth Pastors Coffee. So we're here in Lake County, Florida. All three of our campuses, actually, at our church are in Lake County, Florida, although we reach some people that live in Sumter County in particular, but also some other surrounding counties. But our addresses, our campuses are all in Lake County. And so once a month we go and we hang out with some other youth pastors from Lake County, from other churches, at Starbucks, and we chat about different things every time. Today we talked about, we kind of worked through a list of barriers to growth and a list of strategies for growth. So kind of two contrasting lists. And I thought it was a really helpful conversation. I thought it was pretty cool. I'm interested if you have any highlights from that list or highlights from something that one of the other guys mentioned in terms of stuff that would stifle growth in your student ministry, as well as stuff that would kind of pour some gasoline on growth in your student ministry. Curious if you have any highlights for the people.
It was cool, just I guess maybe to brag on our ministry, like a good amount of things that were things that we should be doing, and it was like, you know, he was asking us, like, which of these things do you guys struggle with? Like, we're not perfect in any of the areas, but a lot of them are things that we do, like following up with students and presenting the gospel and things like that.
Yeah.
But you said it, and I was thinking it. Evangelism is something that we've talked about around here and haven't really made a culture of, like, people have different convictions of how to go about it, but we don't often have, like, you know, let's go downtown and knock door to door, whatever. So I feel like evangelism maybe among that list is something that we could do something different about or do better, I guess is a way to put it. I forget if that's exactly how you put it.
No, that's the one I would highlight. That was on the list of barriers to growth, is a lack of it, which I guess any of these you could put on one of the other lists and phrase it negatively or positively, like. But evangelism was on the barriers to growth list as, you know, if you have a lack of evangelism, that would be a barrier to growth. But you could put it on the strategies for growth list. Like if you have an abundance of evangelism, that's a strategy for growth, you know?
Yeah.
But it was on the barriers list, and I mentioned, like, that's probably a barrier for us, a lack of evangelism, not a great evangelism culture. We've tried, you know, some little things, some evangelism training, some evangelism resources, physical and digital resources. We did an evangelism series a couple months ago to kick off the school year. So we're taking baby steps in that direction, but I don't think we have a bunch of middle schoolers and high schoolers that are sharing their faith once a week kind of thing, which is sad. And it's on us. Like, it's not on them. As I reflect on it more, like I'm interested in how you feel about this. I feel like that would be a church-wide sentiment, not just a student ministry sentiment. What I mean by that is, like, I feel like every campus, every ministry, I feel like we would say, you know what, we probably have a lack of evangelism culture. And not to like call out our church. Like I think I would say that like in any venue. But I think we have some community ministries at our downtown campus, and we have a school, and we have a lot of guests coming in our doors every Sunday. Like I think we are probably, as a church, I think that's the lack of evangelism culture in our student ministry is probably is not caused by a lack of evangelism culture church-wide, but is not unusual to our church, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's not an excuse for it by any stretch, but I feel like that sentiment would probably be shared across ministries, across campuses. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think so. Like, just by nature of what the ministries are, the Christian Care Center does a lot of types of evangelism, but it is more people coming for a need, for food or for housing or medical treatment. And so there's evangelism through people coming to the ministries just because of what they are. But church-wide, and like you said, we're not bashing our church, and
no, not at all.
People of Lake County are being reached, but I would affirm what you said.
Yeah, I think that's a good clarification. Like we are seeing people step from death to life and get baptized and all that kind of stuff, and those are real and powerful, like through the Christian Care Center or whatever. I guess to be more specific, I think we probably have a lack of personal evangelism. Like this week I shared my faith with my neighbor. This week I shared my faith with my coworker.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people coming to Christ through the men's and women's care centers, our addiction centers, through the Samaritan Inn, our homeless shelter, through People Helpers, our counseling center in particular, through our school. Like there's people coming to Christ. Like just at our campuses. Like when someone shows up on a Sunday, gets involved in the ministries, children, students, adult groups, whatever. There's a lot of people coming to Christ that way. So like we have a church that God is blessing. So I'm certainly not bashing our church by any stretch, but like I think in terms of personal evangelism, like I shared my faith with my uncle, or I shared my faith with my next door neighbor, I shared my faith with my coworker, or in student ministry, like I shared my faith with my teammate or my classmate or my friend on Xbox Live or whatever. Like I feel like we have a church-wide personal evangelism issue, and not just in student ministry. So, which is not an excuse by any stretch. It's probably an opportunity to lead out in that area. Like the student ministry could be a catalyst for igniting an evangelism culture church-wide. So that's probably an opportunity there for the students to do 1 Timothy 4:12 to set an example for everybody else. So
that's good.
But yeah, I think that was a highlight for me for sure. A barrier to growth, a lack of evangelism on that list. Any other thoughts in terms of, for you, in terms of like the stuff we talked about at coffee this morning, barriers to growth, strategies for growth, stuff like that?
If I could switch to college ministry again, because I think you've done really well at presenting the gospel. I could say that I definitely haven't had a weekly kind of invitation specify what the gospel is and the importance of it through like every sermon I've preached at late night. Through this series I've done that more, as we're like, hey, these topics are really important, but kind of stuff that you said last night. We're not just trying to change your political views and help you with some character development. Like we want you to know what the gospel is and to know that that's the most important thing you can do, and then God will help transform you, and you don't just work on yourself and become a better person. So I've been doing that more lately. I think that's something that I need to take more seriously. Maybe, I guess even in my small group with our upperclassmen, high school guys, like you can passively just assume you're discipling born-again Christians and not ask the tough questions of something specific, like, has there been a moment when you've decided to put your faith in Jesus and repent of your sins, and not like you grew up in the church and so you just like some point along the line, like, I've just kind of been with the groove of it, whatever. So that's convicting too, of like, I don't think that would ever be beating a dead horse if every week you talk specifically about the gospel. And also I like how you do in student ministry, like you specifically, like maybe you've come a lot, you've heard the gospel a lot, and it's hitting you different tonight for whatever reason, like just really open up the floor. Like I'm always available to talk about the gospel.
I think like I feel confident in incorporating the gospel into any sermon. Like you can make a beeline for the cross no matter where you're preaching from in the Bible. Yeah. Quote Spurgeon. But I don't feel confident. I don't feel like I do a good job with like the invitation piece. What I mean by that is like my version of the invitation is always like, whatever we're preaching on, don't forget about Jesus, the gospel, raised from the dead. And if you want to talk to someone more about it, you can come see me after. Let's pray. Like I don't really like everyone bow your heads. If you want to become a Christian, raise your hand. Yeah, if you want to become a Christian, go see Mitch in the back. If you want to become a Christian, look up at me. If you want to become a Christian, walk down front, and we'll all celebrate you. Or if you want to become a Christian, grab that card from the chair in front of you, and then after the service is over, bring it to me. I haven't nailed that yet, and so I feel comfortable and confident in the way that we kind of circle back to the gospel or incorporate the gospel in every message that we preach. But I think I'm often just like, yeah, and Jesus, if you want to talk about him, let me know. Yeah. Let's pray. Like I don't really like outline concretely what a student should do next. And so I think that's probably an area where we could improve. And I don't think doing an invitation every week is a bad thing. I just don't think we do it well yet. So we can brainstorm that some more a little bit. Yeah. But that was one where as I was listening to the list of strategies for growth, one of the items was do an invitation every week. And I'm like, I think I do. My invitation method is just not good. Like I do an invitation every week. I just don't do the invitation well. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like what am I inviting them to do? Yeah. So we need to think through that a little more. So, but yeah, I mean, whether you have seen the list of barriers to growth or the list of strategies for growth that we saw this morning, those are good categories. Those are good buckets for you to think through if you're listening. To kind of sit down and whiteboard like what are some barriers to growth in our ministry right now? What are some things that are holding us back? And then what are some strategies for growth that we could implement that we're not currently implementing? Those are good categories for thinking, for brainstorming, for strategizing. And so even if you don't have the specific list in front of you that we had in front of us this morning, I would encourage you to think that way. That'll help you in your student ministry. So anything else you want to recap? Any other topics you want to hit before we close it out? Episode 38. Episode 38. Coming up on 40.
Just like Aaron Rodgers. Yeah. Joe Flacco.
That's right.
I can talk about football and whatever else forever, but this was good. This recapping our series and coffee this morning. A lot of cool things have happened lately, but excited to podcast in 6 weeks. Yeah. And a few times in between.
Hopefully a few times in between, yeah. Hopefully a few more times.
The Thanksgiving and the Christmas coming up, so we'll see how that all affects
the Thanksgiving
casting of pods.
And the Christmas. All right. Well, this has been another episode of Effective Student Ministry. This is Garrett.
This is Mitch.
It's a hot guy name.
I was going to say this is hot guy Mitch. Dang.
See you later.
Bye.